Hi, welcome.
Hey, Jeff, how are you doing?
Hey.
Guys, how are you?
Very good. And yourself?
Good. I was just sorry I'm late. I was
Huh?
just rewatching some of the pilot. I got caught up in it.
Oh, nice.
Yes, we've been rewatching everything.
Mm.
It's just a good show, Jeff. It's a really good show. I
Yes,
was
it is.
in our introductory episode to kind of everything that we were doing. I was telling the story about when I got hired on the reshoots for season one, and I asked Karen to read the pilot just because I'd seen the commercial and I wasn't super impressed because I was like, oh, it's Twilight, but then I was like, Karen, look, can I just read the pilot? And then I read it and I was like, this is so good. And she said, she just pushed over a file box of all the scripts and I read them over the weekend. I was like, this is so good. I have to tell everyone about this. But
They
yeah, it's
totally
really
they
good.
totally sold us like Twilight. I remember
Yeah.
seeing the first trailer and I'm like, oh, basically we're such a fucking ripoff.
No, exactly. I remember seeing it during Jersey Shore and just
Yeah.
being like, oh, this is going to be so bad. And then luckily I got to read it all. And I was like, this is so good. This makes no sense. But yeah, so awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jeff, for joining us.
My
And
pleasure.
we're super excited to talk to you about the season one finale, Codebreaker, and maybe a little bit more general stuff about the season itself. Just because we've just finished watching season one, and it's such a great introduction to the show. The pilot does such a fantastic job just grabbing us immediately and introducing us to Scott and Styles and Allison and the whole world itself, and then just following it all through Scott's eyes and seeing as every new episode has a new twist or turn, and it just kind of makes just a wider step back and revealing this greater world in Beacon Hills that Scott and us and everyone didn't know about. And then of course it all culminates with Codebreaker, and Peter's plan is about to come to fruition, and everyone, like every season of Teen Wolf, which is so great, everyone's racing to the finish line to stop the bad guy from accomplishing their goal. And
Just like the production.
yes, just like a production
Race
where
to the
we're
finish line.
all racing to the end. And no, it's fantastic. All right. Well, Kate, do you want to jump in and ask this first question?
Yeah. So, was there anything that changed drastically during the season from how you envisioned it when you wrote the pilot? So, for instance, any characters that you were going to kill off originally that ended up having more of a role, or vice versa, characters that were originally going to have more of a role in the story and kind of took a back seat? Were there any major changes like that that just sort of happened over the course of the season?
You know, I had a very clear plan going in. Um, I would say that the biggest change that happened during the show, during the first season, was probably the pilot itself in the writing of it. You're always trying to find the show. I usually say that most TV shows sort of find out what kind of show they are by like the fourth or fifth episode of the first season. But we really had a clear plan. And the biggest change actually was the pilot itself, because at that point, serialized television hadn't really taken over as much as it has now. And we knew there was going to be ongoing character storylines. We had first thought that maybe it would be, but we'd first thought that maybe it would be more like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like even a monster of the week or some sort of new challenge every week. And so I had this whole subplot in the original pilot outline about the assistant coach being the one who had murdered the girl in the pilot. And it was kind of this whole diversion away from the main plot, and it never really worked. And it was a way for us to try to do these A stories that would resolve in each episode, to make it feel kind of more procedural, I guess. And it was awful. So I was trying to fit the show into something very familiar when what we really needed to do was make it something new. So I remember saying to one of the producers one night, I said, why don't we just dump this character and end the episode with Scott nearly getting caught by the werewolf hunters, and then him finding out that the head werewolf hunter is Allison's father. And it instantly made you want to know what was going to happen next and how could these two kids be in love. And it gave him that star-crossed lovers feel, that dynamic. And it from that moment on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the season. I knew that by the end of episode 3, Derek was going to say to Scott, "I'm not the one who bit you. There's another. There's an alpha." And I knew that there were going to be these red eyes in the darkness that the camera sort of pans to. I knew that at the end of the second act, that it would be revealed that Peter, Derek's supposedly comatose uncle, was the alpha, and that he was slipping away at night as this creature. I knew that I wanted Allison to find out that Scott was a werewolf. There were things that just like signposts that I had. And it's nice when you have sort of a plan like that, but it can also be terrifying because you have to find ways to get to each place, and it can be difficult in the writing. But most of the time we were just trying to get the show done. So we were trying to shoot everything we came up with. But yeah, I don't think that much changed from the original plan.
That's awesome.
Building off that, we were wondering how much of the Teen Wolf story you had mapped out in advance when writing the pilot, like, long term.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were going to be doing with the show at all. They kill us online a lot for not knowing the ages of any of our characters. We were making it up as we went along, really. We didn't know if there was going to be a second season. We didn't know if they were going to air 3 episodes of the first season and then cancel it. This was all very new for MTV, so there wasn't too much of a plan beyond season 1, other than the fact that I knew, even while we were shooting the pilot, that if we were lucky enough to get a season 2, Jackson was going to be the bad guy, and he was going to be this lizard creature. I knew that from the start. There are so many things that do change along the way just because of the needs of production. So you're always finding you have to compromise. One of the most difficult things about shooting the first season was the fucking werewolf. We didn't think we were going to do a CG creature. We thought it was going to be the man in the suit. But there were so many moments where we shot it and it looked completely different from one shot to the next, where we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And finally we said, look, we've got to do some CG work here. And it's either CG work that's going to supplement the original creature suit, or CG work that's going to completely take over. And we ended up doing both. And I said I would never go back to doing another giant CG monster again. And then, of course, in season 5, that's exactly what we did.
It is what we did.
Yeah.
Sorry, Will, I didn't mean to step on you.
No worries. Could you mute for a second, Kate?
Dogs are barking.
Yes. But I do love, from watching the first season, like I love those moments where like when Kate's driving in her introduction and you see the alpha outside and it's clearly CG and all that. But I love when the action punches in closer and it is the guy in the suit. I love all that stuff, and I think the shots that were used are the perfect right moments, especially with stuff like when you first hear the alpha's voice for the first time when he's talking with Harrison, and you just see the hand and then he throws the desk and all that, but just cutting in for those close-ups of just teeth and eyes and all that, where it is the guy in the suit throwing Scott and Derek around and all that. I think y'all did just such a fantastic job of marrying the two and finding the exact right balance for it, because it for like some of those bigger shots and stuff where you're using the CG, it looks great, but then like when it's the action's right in your face, you've got this guy in this great suit and or maybe not great suit, but still it looks perfect for the exact amount of frames that are used, and it's fantastic.
the CG creature looks completely different from shot to shot and sometimes. But that's, I mean, we were doing this on a $5 budget. And I mean, anytime you commit to CG like that, you know you're going to be testing the audience's suspension of disbelief. Like, I love Black Panther, but that CG fight in the end defies the laws of physics.
Yeah, it's not the best.
Yeah, there are some moments in there where I'm like, well, at least it's not just us. But there are some amazing moments, like in the finale when, and this was an idea that Russell Mulcahy had after we shot the finale. He wanted to go back in and punch up the fight scene between Scott and Peter. And he said to me, he wanted, like, when Scott punches Peter, like, part of his face transforms. And that was an idea I hadn't had in the script, and Russell came up with it after we'd shot the whole finale, and it looked so cool on screen. Those were the most effective uses of CG that we did. As for the creature in the suit looking great, I do remember, like, one of my favorite shots is in episode 7, when they're trapped in a school, and there's a close-up of the creature in the window of the high school lab, I think. And he looked fucking great there. And I'm like, God, can we just get it to look that good all the time? I mean, you understand, like, how difficult it must have been for people like Ridley Scott during Alien, where in some shots it looks so cool, the alien, because he's got the dripping and the wetness. But then there are other shots where you're like, yeah, that's a guy in a suit. That's clearly a guy in a suit, because there's this one shot in Alien, remember when Tom Skerritt dies, where the alien reaches out like this, and it is so clearly a guy in, like, a Halloween costume. But yeah, so you do the best you can with the tools you have at the time.
Well, y'all did amazing. Y'all did just amazing on such a shoestring budget, to pull off such a great season. What do you have a favorite episode of the first season?
There are a lot of moments in every episode that I love. And I was thinking to myself, I know one of my favorite episodes was, it's funny because the penultimate episode can always be really good, because you give your characters a chance to breathe. So I have a lot of love for Formality, episode 11, partially because it was one of the episodes when we were shooting it, we really began to understand what a great dramatic actor Dylan O'Brien was. And so that was sort of amazing to see. We knew he was funny, but we had no idea he would be so good at drama. And there are so many moments like Styles telling Lydia to dance with him, and God, what are the other scenes? Argent facing off with Jackson, the moment, the whole winter formal was fun to write. There are funny moments, dramatic moments, and then the ending where Allison sees Scott as a werewolf for the first time. Scott jumps up on the two cars as they come screaming to a halt right at him. And I remember seeing that scene cut together and seeing the way they look at each other and just being incredibly happy with it, because, I mean, Crystal and Tyler Posey had such good chemistry. And if they didn't have good chemistry, we would have been dead. So, and that moment works mostly because of their chemistry, because you don't want them to lose their relationship. But then again, like, in terms of favorite episodes, I have to say, like, the pilot's my favorite episode because we're all so new. But I actually think that the finale might be my favorite, because there's so many things about it that made me feel like we had found something special by the end of the season. Especially moments like when Allison kisses Scott. She sort of takes his face as he turns away from her because he's a monster, but she kisses him and transforms him back to human just with her kiss. I loved Dino Menigan's score at the end, where he brings in this huge sweeping love theme as they're sitting on the rooftop. I love when Derek's eyes glow red at the end and he says, "I'm the alpha now." I still get chills when I watch it. I remember we had a big cast party screening to watch the finale together. And at that point, we weren't like a ratings hit on MTV, but we knew we were sort of gaining this sort of cult following, but we were super proud of the show. And I remember when we were watching, and everyone was there, I think there was like 50 of us or something, and Derek kills Peter and says, "I'm the alpha now." And I remember everybody screamed at that line. And Eklund was especially proud of that moment. He loved it. He loved being the bad guy in that moment. So,
he did fantastically well, as did everyone across the whole board of the first season and culminating in the finale. I mean, it's a great episode, and it definitely, when cast and crew watch it, there should be lots of pride, when they watch that. So yeah.
That actually kind of leads into the next question really well. All of the characters have such big moments in the finale. Which I think is one of the things that the show is always really good at doing, is intertwining their stories, but making it feel like a lot of really important things are happening to all of the characters that we care about. So whose story were you most proud of, either in the finale or in the season as a whole?
I think I'd still have to say, because the biggest change happens with Scott, and I'm most proud of it. And one of the things you're seeing during that season is Tyler Posey really growing into the character, and he'll tell you himself, he's learning how to act on screen. And seeing the moments with him, becoming a hero, the first glimpses of his becoming a hero. I was really proud of that. It's very much a Peter Parker Spider-Man story. But it is hard to pick just one, because I also love Stiles and Jackson teaming up and seeing the progression of Jackson's character when he offers to take Stiles in his Porsche, and Stiles says, "I'm driving." I loved Argent's moral dilemma with his sister. I loved Derek becoming the alpha. It was fun to write, and it was fun to see all of these threads come together. And I remember being proud of being able to give each character their moment in that finale. Because everybody does get a moment. And I think that's when these stories work best. It's a lesson I learned well from Charles Dickens, actually. If you go back and look at Tale of Two Cities, every character gets a heroic moment in that book. All the way down to the chambermaid who blocks the doors with her body and says, "You're not going to get past." So it's fun to write those stories. So to answer your question, probably Scott, but I'm proud of all of them.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about rewatching the finale is that because Lydia is kind of out of commission, you anticipate that Lydia isn't going to get to have her moment. But then you get to the part where they defeat Peter using her idea and you're like, oh my God, even though she is comatose and can't even be there, she still gets to be part of it, you know? And that's something that was building through the season. And that is really cool. I thought rewatching
cocktails.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fun when you can find those callbacks. I love that. I love that in storytelling. And those are the things you don't know that are going to happen until you're sitting there going, how am I going to get them out of this situation? Oh yeah, the Molotov cocktails from the episode 7. I remember when we were doing season 3B, one of my writers was freaking out because he didn't know how we were going to resolve the whole season. There's no way we're going to be able to do this. And I remember saying to him, "Don't worry about it. We've set things up and we're going to find things." And we did. The scene where the Shigendo scroll and where they trapped the fly and we had no idea we were going to do any of that until the very end.
I remember you calling that the unconscious writer.
Yes.
That you don't realize you're laying the groundwork for the story because you think, oh, in this moment, this jar or this thing is cool. It works just here. And then like 5 episodes later, you're like, oh, but it also works here. And you get to wrap it all up in a nice little bow.
The subconscious writer is always listening. Yeah.
There's another great one with Lydia. I love Lydia, in case that wasn't obvious, but
Me too.
There's in the first season you have her this really lovely scene where she's sitting in front of her vanity putting on makeup and covering up all evidence of this really traumatic thing that she's gone through. But then in season 3, when she almost gets strangled and she has the bruises around her neck, and her mom's like, I'll help you cover it up. And she's like, why? I'm not going to. And it's such a beautiful callback to that earlier moment and how she's grown as a person, that earlier it was really important to her to cover that up. And now she feels like this is a badge of honor. This is something I survived. And just the parallel between those two scenes is so incredible.
That is one of the joys of both writing and watching TV, is being able to see that sort of like level of character growth and because there's no room for that in a 2-hour movie. You're basically, when you're doing a 2-hour movie, you get one character or maybe 2 or 3. But in TV, you get to see them grow, and you can have callbacks that are 4 seasons from that moment. And that's what I love about TV, seeing characters grow like that. And Lydia was one of the most fun characters to write. We had no idea what she was going to become. We had no idea she was going to be a banshee. Just that the bite was definitely going to have a different effect on her in the end. I knew that I wanted to surprise the audience that way. And that was the beginning, the end. Her story, when they say, well, what is she turning into if she's not a werewolf? That was the beginning of opening up this sort of Pandora's box of all the other myths that we could play around with in the shapeshifter universe, which basically allowed me to do a walking lizard person in the second season.
Actually, going off that, I know you said that if you got a second season, you wanted Jackson to be a lizard guy and the guy. Was Derek always going to bite Jackson? Was that always the plan?
Yes, I believe it was. Yes, because I knew that when you write these things, you sometimes have stuff that you're absolutely certain is going to happen in the end, and then you never get to it. And you kind of toss it away, and you're like, I was never going to do that. But I was so certain that Jackson wanted the bite, and he was going to get it some way. He wanted it so badly, which contrasted with Styles not wanting the bite. In that moment where Peter offers it to him, and he doesn't want it. So it was a way to differentiate their two characters, and it was a way to tell a story of be careful what you wish for. That kind of power, absolute power, corrupts absolutely. So that was definitely in the cards, always in the cards.
Will, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Will.
There we go. Sorry. When Derek returned to Beacon Hills because of Laura and all that, and then when he discovered that there was the Alpha out there, do you think from the start he wanted to kill the Alpha to then become an Alpha, or was that just in the moment, I'm going to kill Peter and I accept that this is going to happen, or was he like, I'm doing this to now be an Alpha?
No, that was his plan. Okay. It was always planned that Derek's main goal was to be the Alpha, was to take that power and form his own pack now that his sister was dead. It was partly revenge, but partly his own lust for power, which is why in season 2, you see him gathering his pack and thinking this is going to be the best thing in the world and watching it slowly fall apart. So we wanted to make him the person who wants to be king and then is not quite aware of just how heavy the crown is upon his head. So it was always going to be that story for Derek.
That's great. That's fantastic.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Jackson's storyline kind of being in contrast to Styles, because one of the questions that we wanted to ask was, did you guys ever discuss the possibility of Styles taking the bite?
Yes, and there were always people along the way who said, make Styles a werewolf. We got to make Styles a werewolf this year. Shouldn't you make Styles a werewolf? And I was absolutely adamant from day one that he would never, ever become a werewolf or have any supernatural power unless he was a bad guy for one season. So he always had to stay the human. And that is partially because I always wanted a character there who was the surrogate for the audience, who his superpower was his smarts and his determination and his will to protect his friends. That Styles' superpower. So there was never a chance of him getting the bite.
I love that, Styles stays human. I was just telling them, though, like, the one thing Teen Wolf is so perfect, but the only thing I ever was left wondering was maybe like an episode like The Whoosh from Buffy. You compared it to Buffy earlier, where, you see an alternate reality, and I would have loved to see, like, what would have happened if Styles would have been the one bitten just for, like, one episode, just, like, seeing what that would have happened.
A great Marvel what if.
Yeah.
Yes, I love
exactly.
those.
That would have been great.
Always love those.
Yeah. We'll have to do that in the comic book spin-off at some point.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So, let's see. So the finale has some great character. Cannot speak. Just some great character moments. What was the casting process like, trying to find the characters? Did the casting of certain actors change the way you approached writing the character differently?
Yes, definitely. Well, one thing you definitely learn in shooting a season of television and shooting it so quickly too is you learn their strengths and their weaknesses. And one of the nice things to discover was that, like, Tyler Posey wasn't just a good romantic lead, he could be funny. So I wanted to write funny stuff for him, which eventually turned into him being, like, stupid. So, or the audience believing that he was stupid, but I just felt he was naive. I wanted to write him as a naive 16-year-old. And, like, one of my favorite moments from the pilot is when Jackson says to him, "Where are you getting your juice?" He says, "My mom does all the grocery shopping." And he says it so perfectly. And Colton's look in that moment is so perfect. We almost didn't shoot that scene. When we were doing the pilot presentation, the network wanted to cut that scene because we were running out of time. And I said, "We have to have this scene. If we don't have this scene, I'm going to die." And I said, "I will." And so what I said was, "I will forego my executive producer fee and pay for this scene." And literally that night, as we were on set, I got on the phone with my manager and agent and lawyer and said, "I'm paying for this scene, forgo my EP fee, add it to the budget. If the show goes forward, they can pay me back." And it's one of my favorite scenes in the pilot and in the show, actually.
Yeah, that has such lasting power. I think that's such a great call that you made, because I still see in fandom people referencing how amazing that line is and how funny.
Yeah, we actually looked on YouTube just to find the exact clip after we'd already watched the episode. And there are a bunch of YouTube videos that are literally just those two lines, where people just uploaded that one exchange.
Yeah, it wasn't a little bit of money I was giving up too. So, but I knew that one of the things I had to do with that pilot was demonstrate that this show was going to be funny. There was another massive fight about a scene with the network, which maybe I shouldn't tell you about, but screw it, I can.
Go for it.
It was the scene between Styles, Danny, and Derek, which we all know, the Miguel scene. And the network hated it.
Why?
They didn't want me to shoot it. They didn't want when we did shoot it, they didn't want it in the episode. They wanted me to cut it out. I fought like crazy. I actually said to one of the executives, on the phone come to Atlanta and fire me and hung up on them.
Oh boy.
As we were shooting that scene. They felt it was silly. They didn't feel it was the show. But I kept saying to them, it's going to be funny and it's also sexy. And yes, it's a really gay scene too, which may have been some of their fear as well. But I was such a little shit for shooting it and getting my way and pissing and moaning about it. And eventually I basically just kept saying, no, I'm not cutting it out. And it ended up in the episode, and it's one of my favorite scenes.
I love that scene.
Yeah, it's
like,
a great
another
scene.
huge fandom favorite.
Yeah, and people still quote that scene because it's so funny, you know, of like putting Derek, who up until that point has just been this silent, brooding, no-nonsense character, and making him the comic relief in a scene, and kind of almost like this fish out of water, you know, that he is not this person, and then putting him into it while Styles is trying to get Danny to find this information for them, which then, of course, leads to the levity of the scene makes the end of the scene even better when they get the answer, because it's a slap in the face, you know, when it's like, oh, Melissa, you know, it's like
that was one of their big fears, was Derek being funny in that scene, was Derek being like, but I thought it humanized his character, and it made him charming, and it told us, don't think he's going to be the bad guy the whole time. He might be unexpected. He might make some unexpected moves and some turns, which also helps the moment at the end when he does kill Peter and says, "I'm the alpha now," because the audience is partially saying to themselves, "Oh, don't do it! I liked you in that scene. You're this close to being a good guy," and then he does it, and you're conflicted, but you also love it because he's got that power now, and he's still the sexy bad guy, but he's the sexy bad guy with also good qualities. So that's what you get to do in a show like Teen Wolf, and that's serialized, that tells new stories every season. You get to change the characters, whereas most of television up to that point was procedural, which was all about characters starting off an episode one way and then coming back to exactly where they were at the end of the episode. All of TV was like that, basically coming back to homeostasis. In serialized, you have to evolve. So that's one of the things I love about serialized.
Well, it's great too, watching characters get to grow, you know, because like with procedural or with like the sitcom format, you're right. It's like at the beginning of every episode is just the big reset button, you know, and it's like all the wonderful things that the characters just went through. Now it doesn't matter anymore. You know, you have to start over and find a new arc for them in this episode, instead of being like, but this is a season long arc or a series long arc, and you get to watch this great progression of a character, like with Derek, where someone who is struggling so hard to be a leader, you know, that he's like, I'm not going to make the same mistakes. We're going to do this right. And people aren't going to lose their families the way I did. And then the culmination of his arc is, I'm not the alpha. That's not me. I'm not the leader. I need someone to follow. I need a charismatic leader that I can help accomplish these wonderful goals. And that's such a good arc, because it's so rare that you have a hero say, I'm not the hero. That this whole life goal that I've had is wrong, and I have to find the right way to be myself. So and you're right, you don't get that type of thing in movies. You know, that's great because you have so many seasons, especially after you have a season like season 2 where he just constantly fails. That he's like, I'm doing this correctly, and then all of his pack members, they just start dropping because it's not correct. He's doing it the wrong way after all. So it's quite good. Let's see here. In season 1, Scott is told that if you kill the alpha who bit you, that you'll then be human again. if Scott had in the finale actually been the one to kill Peter, do you think it would have worked? Was there ever discussion that maybe that is correct? Like that if you did kill the Alpha that turned you, you get your life back type of thing?
Yes, I always knew the answer to that. And that was that it was a falsehood,
Awesome.
that it was a false promise, that killing another, that there was no way back. Once you had been changed, you were changed for good. And it was always going to be a false promise for Scott. We never really clarified that in the end, though.
Yeah, I'm like freaking out. I just learned something that I've wondered for 10 years. So that's amazing.
Yeah. But things like that are good because they led me to an idea that I didn't realize I was going to do, which was the idea of Scott becoming a true alpha, which was a werewolf. So we had the question, well, what if you don't kill a werewolf? Can you still become, what if you don't kill the alpha? Can you still become an alpha on your own? And I thought to myself, well, what if you can become an alpha just by pure will, the pure nature of your character, and it felt like such a way of Scott to progress and grow, not by taking something, but by being a good person, that he could become a leader just by being a good person. So that question of how does Scott have to handle being the alpha wolf that bit him, led to the idea of the true alpha. So I love it when things like this, when questions like this lead to answers that help you create a whole season and a bigger character arc.
And that was a great character arc for Scott of when he does finally just become the alpha just through sheer force of presence and just being good, that he is always fighting for what's right. Like he's never, like he said, he's never taking, he's not doing this to gain something. He's doing it to protect people or to offer something to someone else. And then having that be his amazing transformation into an alpha is just fantastic. So good. So good.
Pushing through the wolf.
Pushing through the it's such a good scene. Yeah, because that's when Deaton's strung up, and it's like it's the great thing that's like you're trapped behind something that's impossible to break. It's like what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, and you end up with a true alpha is apparently what the answer to that question is. So that's such a good scene. Scott or Tyler just gave it all.
He becomes an alpha not by trying to kill someone, but by trying to save a life.
Right. Oh, it's fantastic. It's so good. So good. So good.
Well, this has been very good for my self-esteem, guys.
Wonderful. This is fantastic.
Yeah, even better. So, okay, we had talked about some of the scenes and stories that were included because you fought for them. So one of the things that we wondered was, were there any stories or scenes that did not get included in the first season that you wished could have been included?
Honestly, I can't remember. I've thought about that as well. And I know that whatever we wanted to do in the first season that we couldn't, we eventually did in other seasons. So we were like, oh, now we have the chance to do this, and now we have the chance to do that. I think most of the stuff that we wanted to do that we couldn't was either because of budget or because of our ideas were simply too grand for what we would have been able to accomplish with the CG or with the budget at that time. I know that part of the thing about doing that first season was it was simply a race to get everything to look good. I mean, you have no idea how difficult it was just to do Scott's makeup or Derek's makeup. I remember we did a test of Derek's makeup, and he literally looked like a drag queen without a wig. It was so bad.
I would like to see that photo of that.
I think it's online somewhere. He's got this big thing coming down here, and it just looks absolutely terrible. And so I spent hours in my trailer one night with Photoshop, like changing his face and then bringing it back to the makeup people and saying, make it look like that. One of the things I did, because I knew I wanted him to look more evil than Scott, was no eyebrows. If you look at Derek in the first season, he doesn't have eyebrows. And that sort of large brow makes him look more aggressive and more inhuman. And it worked. It was little things like that. My God, the first time that the big werewolf came out, we all had a panic attack because it did not look good. We had to switch makeup teams right in the middle. And we learned that doing werewolves is really hard. I mean, because eventually it's going to be a guy in a big furry suit lumbering around and you trying to make it look good and thinking, oh God, should we just crank down the lighting? Everybody says, oh God, the seasons of Teen Wolf are dark and some of those shots are too dark to see anything. There's a reason for that. If that shot was any lighter, you'd see the seams in the costume and you'd see all the little pieces of duct tape that we tried to hide. If we were in trouble in the editing room, I would be sitting there going, just make it darker. Just darken it. And that's what you do when you make a show for fucking $5. But I got to tell you, by the time we got to season 3, it was well known in the industry, like what we were able to accomplish on our budget. And people were like, how the hell are they doing that? We got a lot of respect in the industry, in Hollywood, for what we were able to achieve on our budget. I remember one of my directors went off to shoot another show, and he told me what the VFX budget on that show was, and I couldn't believe it. It was half of one of our episode budgets. And if we had that much money, who knows? But I'm really proud of what we were able to do with the things we had. I mean, one of our pickup shoots for the first season, we did in one of our producers' garages. And the scene the moment where Tyler gets dragged by a werewolf, where he gets bitten by the werewolf, by the alpha in the first episode, I'm the one with Tyler's legs in my arms, dragging him off camera. There's a moment where Jackson hits Tyler on the lacrosse field, bumps into him. That's me in Jackson's outfit. There were so many scenes like that where it was just like, all right, give me the wardrobe, I'll do it. Russell, shoot this. We were really like, at certain points, it felt like a student film shoot or just like a really cheap independent movie.
It's so funny to hear because it's such an incredibly polished show watching it as a fan. Like, I would think you guys had all the money in the world because it's just incredibly impressive what you did.
I remember from the season 2 pickups where you're in Styles's clothes, and because there was the shot of him getting thrown up against the wall or whatever had to be picked up, and that was you in his outfit for that shot. And just to jump back for a quick second, you talking about using Photoshop to kind of create the image you wanted to give to the makeup effects guys. A lot of my favorite and best memories from the show are you drawing. Because there were some times when instead of describing a shot to us or a scene, you would just get up on the whiteboard and draw it. And I remember distinctly when we went to Malibu for that little retreat where while we were, I think it was at the end of the day, and we'd had dinner or whatever, and we were all just kind of hanging out, and you drew Kate as the wall for the first time on your iPad, and you were just like, I think this is what it's going to be. And it was like exactly the makeup, like exactly the design of her skin and everything. And it's like, you did that in 10 fucking minutes or whatever, or something like that. Or even later in the series when we had in the script the Beacon Hills or the Beacon High School sign is now in the corridor, and it's like, oh, it's super simple. You just do this, and you just drew like the shot of what is finally in the episode itself of that sign broken into giant pieces. And
it was so much fun to go on set with the drawing and compare the two and be like, it's a wonderful feeling when you say, I want you guys to make this, and then they build it. It's such a we forget how lucky we are to be working in this gigantic playground. It really is. It's a joy and a gift. It really is.
A great gift.
So I know you mentioned having some issues with the look of the alpha, but looking back now, is there anything you would change about the first season?
There's so much you would change. I had thought about that for a long time. There's one moment actually in the first season that is hard for me to watch because I hate it. And I'm curious to see if you guys will agree with me on this, but I'm not sure that I would change it. And I'll tell you the reason why in a second. And it's the scene where Scott and Lydia kiss. At that moment, we were really trying to appease the network, who wanted us to do love triangles and more soap opera and sex things up. And I was like, all right, well, we'll have Scott and Lydia make out and be really hot. And watching it, I was like, this doesn't feel right at all. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, I don't like this. But I knew that like it was supposed to represent Scott under the sway of the full moon and betrayal of his friendship with Stiles. And it did work for that. And then the other thing is, and here's the reason I wouldn't change it, because if we didn't have that moment, we wouldn't have in the next episode one of my favorite scenes, which is Stiles' little revenge against Scott, where he's pelting him with the lacrosse balls. And so if you lose the first scene, you don't get the second one. So Scott had to do something that was a betrayal of Stiles. But I think from that moment on, I never went back to ever the possibility of Scott and Lydia having any sort of attraction to each other ever again. So that was one of those moments where I was just trying to give something to the network, but I still don't know if I would change it, because you wouldn't have the other scene, or maybe you would have it in a different way, but you never know. Yeah. What do you guys think? Are you on board with me with that?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I do really love Stiles' reaction and how he deals with it and everything. So yeah, in that sense, I do agree. But I am glad that Teen Wolf didn't continue on with a bunch of like love triangles, because that was the one I was afraid the show was going to be. And it's just so much more, and the characters are incredibly interesting, and just it's completely different from like Twilight and everything that was happening around that time. And yeah, I don't think the fans would love it as much if it was just reduced to a bunch of love triangles.
Yeah, and I think actually shooting that scene, after that scene, I was more adamant than ever that there would never be a love triangle on the show, that we just weren't going to do that, which led to also one of the other things that I really liked, which was when Scott and Allison broke up and they each sort of have their other relationships and they're okay with it. They try to support each other. You rarely see that on TV.
Yeah.
Right.
In a breakup of one person trying to say to the other, be happy. I hope you're happy, and good for you for finding someone that you like again. So those things do lead to other stuff like that. But yeah, even still watching Scott and Lydia kissing.
It was
it feels so wrong.
It feels very wrong. It feels very wrong. It was a little cringy watching it. But I think
so cringy.
What I do like most about that scene is I guess I've always looked at that scene from Lydia's perspective, because we've already established, in that episode, but then also earlier, that it's, because she's hiding the fact that she's super smart. Like she doesn't think that is how she can get ahead in the world. So the other option is find the strong person, or find the person who's on their way up to attach yourself to, so that then I can go with them. And in that moment, it looks like Scott's going to be that person. So she's like, I need to now be with him in order, so I don't get left behind. But when we were watching and looking at that scene, I was just thinking about where Lydia ends up.
Yeah.
Because she does finally have that revelation of, I don't need to define myself based on anyone else. So it makes that moment so much stronger when you've actually seen that she's with Jackson, but she's willing to leave Jackson to be with someone else if she believes it's better for her in the long run.
Yeah.
So it's a great beginning of that arc, and then culminating with her being like, I'm my own person. I don't need, I don't have to hide anything about myself to be strong or to get ahead. And
I loved writing those moments too. Like, the moments where she hides her intelligence, where she corrects Jackson, saying things like, a mountain lion is a cougar. And then she's like, what?
Isn't it? I love that.
I think I read that somewhere.
That bit that she does where she pauses, realizes what she said, and then goes, isn't it? And it's just like, I love all those early, I love all those early bits with her. And it does, like you said, Will, it does kind of, as cringy as it is, it kind of sets her arc in greater contrast, because that moment from Lydia's perspective does feel very like strategic.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, she's not just like, oh, it would be fun to kiss Scott. She's like, this is like a chess move to her. Right.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Scott, because he's so naive, I don't think he's able to see it from that perspective, but
and under the sway of the full moon, he's basically a person at that time.
Right.
Yeah. So no, there was these things were so much fun to figure out. I knew that, like, when we were planning the season, I always knew that she was the sort of mean girl who had a soul and who was hiding her incredible intelligence. And Holland she just played it so well. And she was like the last person we cast in that. We had someone else that was supposed to play the role, and I think we lost them for some reason. And we basically said, Holland was like, I think she was the last person cast. And we were like, get on a plane right now. We need you in Atlanta. And I love her to death. I really do.
She's fantastic. Yeah. We've previously talked about how, like, filming a TV show is just the race to the end. You're racing to the end of the budget, the end of the daylight, right before they're going to turn off the generators and all that. And but knowing that now, do you have any special memories from actually filming the finale, or was it just that race to the finish line that there really wasn't? You're not really able to look back on it like that without able to take out all the stress and the anxiety that was going with it?
Well, as you know, having been on the show, every finale we did was sort of a mad scramble to the finish every time we did a last episode. What a lot of people don't know about that first season is that we were shooting these episodes, we were shooting them in 3-episode blocks. So we were shooting 10, 11, and 12 all at the same time. So, like, remember the scenes in the Macy's we had to shoot for 11? Mm-hmm. So all the scenes between Stiles and Peter in the parking garage, where they're figuring out Scott's password and username, that's outside the Macy's. Because we shot both the episode 11 scene and the episode 12 scene on the same night. So a lot of shooting the finale was being done during episodes 10, 11, and some of it was being done even earlier. I remember that one of my absolute favorite moments from the last episode was when Allison goes to see Lydia in the hospital, and she keeps having these flashes of her covered in blood. And it was such like classic horror movie shocks. And I love the way Russell shot it. And he uses this wonderful trick to make it look so weird and creepy, where what he did was he filmed it with everyone walking backwards. And then we play it in reverse. So go watch that scene again, and you'll notice the strange way that Allison is walking is because we shot her walking backwards. It's a trick that Brian De Palma used at the end of Carrie, and it's during the dream sequence, and it's so unsettling. If you watch the end of Carrie, you will actually see, I think, a car going backwards.
Yeah.
Behind,
so cool.
what's her name?
Yeah, incredible.
But that's one of my favorite scenes, and it was one of those moments where I was like, all right, even if we don't get a second season, we did some fun shit in this show. And stuff like those first moments where she sees Lydia doing the movements with blood all over her. I remember being in the editing room and saying, take all the sound out. Don't have a sound there. Just have it be, just have the image, because that's exactly what they did in The Exorcist. Whenever you saw those shots of Pazuzu, there was no shock. There was no screech of violins during that moment. We just saw the shot of Pazuzu, of that face, of, I forget what he calls them, Mr. something. What do they call him?
I don't remember.
But Pazuzu is the name of the demon, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it scared the hell out of me because it comes silently. And we did that, and we just did stuff that we loved, that was fun for us, that scared us. And that was one of the joys of shooting that first season, is we did whatever we wanted. And I fought all the fights with the network on stuff. There were a couple screaming matches. One of the things the network actually hated, just did not want me to do, was I knew all along, you were asking this question before, but I knew all along that I wanted Deaton to be someone who has, for a long time, protected the secrets of werewolves and acted as sort of a doctor to them. And the network was like, we don't want this, it's too much. They absolutely hated the idea, and they insisted that Deaton stay a veterinarian. And I actually screamed at an executive because of it. I was like, not doing that. Do it my way.
What about that did they object to?
They just felt like it was too many people in the town in the know, and it made it feel smaller. Whereas I actually felt that it did the opposite. It made the mythology that much bigger, you know? And that was just another time when I bitched and moaned and got my way. So, and I just knew I wanted him to be like an Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. I wanted him to be a father figure to Scott. The original version of his character, he was supposed to be gay, actually. I can't remember why we changed it, but God, I can't remember actually. But we had plenty of gay characters after that. So
Very true. Very true. Which is wonderful. So
Yes.
And Seth Gilliam did such a great job playing him. I remember when he was carrying him in, I think it was episode 10. It just felt right to me. I didn't care if anyone else liked it. That was what I wanted to do, and we did it.
it was perfect.
A lot of doing the first season of a TV show is pushing to get your way. So.
No, we're very happy that you
paid off,
did.
Yeah.
It completely paid off. So, I mean, it definitely worked out, I think, in everyone's favor. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a point, too, where one of the executives, Justin Levy, said he watched, I think, episode 11, and he said to me over the phone, he said, we have some notes, do them or don't do them. The show's fucking awesome.
Wow.
And it was really nice to have the network, like, just say, we're totally on board with this. Go for it. So, and it was great. So I have such fond memories of that show. And of all the people in it too. It was hard to do. It was the hardest job of my life, but it's so rewarding too. So, and which is why I'm still talking about it.
Yeah.
Yes,
years
no,
after it aired.
exactly. No, I mean, you and everyone who's worked with you, I mean, you create something great.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like it's still, despite all of the content we get now, that you have something that just connects with people so strongly, you know, that even 10 years later, people still want to to talk to you about it, and it's just a fucking great thing. It's just so good. It's just so good, that you got to do the thing that people love, so.
Yeah. I was telling Will that, I love TV. I consume so much of it, but I haven't felt as passionate about anything since Teen Wolf as I did about Teen Wolf. It was just really so amazing, and I still love it, more than anything else I've watched since then, even though there's so many great television shows on. It's just, the cast was just so perfect. Everything about the show was amazing, and I haven't felt that kind of passion since then.
That makes me very happy to hear.
Yeah, I feel like the mythology is such a big part of that too. Going back to the Twilight thing, a friend of ours recommended the show to us after the first season had already aired, right?
Yeah, but the second season hadn't started.
Right. And so, we were kind of like, are you sure? Because we kind of assumed that Twilight had killed werewolves the way it killed vampires, right? That's kind of, werewolves are basically over now, right? And she was like, no, just trust me. And I feel like one of the things that really sold me on the show is that it was a different take on werewolves, and ultimately other things too. But there were a lot of elements that felt very new, the claws in the back of the neck, and when Jackson starts having visions, right? Yeah. And the idea that this is something that werewolves do I was like, I have never heard something like that before associated with werewolves. And that in and of itself could lead to so many interesting stories. So, something like that, it just felt very fresh.
It's cool. Yeah.
And it did lead to some great stories for 3A, and it was where you have that wonderful opening with Daniel and Megan, where he's like, oh, they had you. It's like, I don't remember any of that. Well, they could take memories and put memories into you and stuff like that. And it's just so fresh and interesting, and it was just the best.
It was a really fun show to write.
Yes.
I remember in season 3A, when we were doing it, I remember turning to Joe Janier and saying, I want to put ninjas in the next season. And he said, I love ninjas. And we did it. So we got to do all different genres. We got to do romance, humor, suspense, horror. It was really fun. It was a great gift to have that, to be able to play in all those different sandboxes.
It absolutely was. I think we have one final question, and that's going to wrap us up. Kate, you wanna ask it?
I think we have a couple still, but one of the questions, sort of going back to what was planned and what wasn't planned, was it always the plan for Kate and Peter to return? Which I guess is kind of two questions, but we see what seems like the demise of both of them in the season 1 finale. So at the time that the season 1 finale was happening, did you intend to bring both of those characters back?
Didn't intend to bring both back. You get to a point where, at the end of the season, you want to tell the audience that the stakes are real, so there has to be some bodies, I've gotten this idea in my head of it was a little bit of Star Trek, Wrath of Khan. Okay, so Peter's bite with Lydia, the first idea with that was that he had done it as an insurance policy for himself. Like in the same way that Spock mind melds with McCoy and puts part of his soul into McCoy that allows them to resurrect him in season 3. I wanted to do that same story with Lydia and Peter in season 2, where Lydia is kind of going crazy because Peter is in her head. So I had come up with that before we ended the season because Ian Bohen was really bummed that his character was over. And I said to him, just be quiet about this, but if we come back for another season, I'm bringing you back. So that was my way to bring Peter back. And part of it that I really liked was just driving Lydia crazy and having her have this whole subplot with a young Peter who was purely in her head. And it was a way to explore her character and make her sort of an inadvertent bad guy as well during the season, but then have her change by the end of it and turn it into a power. So she goes from a victim to becoming more powerful because of it. So.
It's a great character arc.
It's wonderful. It's very, very good.
I know that you said that you hadn't originally planned on, you didn't know that Lydia was going to become a banshee. Before you settled on banshee, was there any other supernatural creatures that you contemplated?
God, I don't remember, but I just knew that, like, she was our Jamie Lee Curtis, and she was so good at screaming and playing fear. She was our scream queen, basically. So it just somehow became a natural progression that she became the Irish screaming banshee. Of course, she nearly ruined her vocal cords because of it. So we had to use her same scream over and over again. But I remember at one point telling her, "Don't scream. You need to protect your voice." And she's like, "But that's the character." I'm like, "You don't have to do it anymore. I swear to God." So
I do remember her having between takes or whatever that she kind of had her own Gollum juice. There was like tea and some honey and stuff because she was going for it. So you'd see her with like this little mug of whatever brew they were coming up with, the same sort of similar to what they did with Andy Serkis on Lord of the Rings. But yeah, it was fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I think we are out of questions here, but
it's a pleasure,
thank you.
guys.
Yes.
It's great talking.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for joining us for this finale for season 1, and we've had a great time so far. Been watching the episodes and going through it episode by episode and just kind of reliving the story of Scott and Stiles and Lydia and everyone in this crazy Northern California town, Beacon Hills, with all this craziness starts to happen from just this, the most innocuous of things of let's sneak out tonight. You know, there's
For
some
dead
stuff,
body.
just for a dead body, but you know, let's sneak out, and then 100 episodes later, you know, you have the final culmination of it all from just these
100 episodes. I still
100
can't
awesome
believe
episodes.
it. If you had told me back then that we'd be doing 100 episodes of Teen Wolf, I would have been like, what could we possibly have to say by episode 100? Turns out we could have kept going. And some people still want us to.
This guy right here would very much like another version of Teen Wolf. Because there's, we were talking about this before you joined us, that there are so many different stories to tell with different people being the Teen Wolf, you know, because it's taking this awful, terrible thing happening to someone and then infusing their own personal stories, their own histories, you know, ancestry and stuff like that into it. And there's 7 billion people on the planet. So that means there's 7 billion different ways of telling this type of story, you know, because it's universal, but also very personal and detailed at the same time. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's lasted so long, that people 10 years on just can't get enough of it.
Still asking for Teen Wolf season 7.
Season 7. It can totally happen.
Maybe one of these days.
Maybe one day. That'd be awesome. Well, again,
thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeff. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Great talking to you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Oh, my thing's breaking. There we go. Well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I think that was fantastic.